There we go. Perfect. Awesome. All right. I am Trevor Hubbs. I am the Armed Forces Initiative Coordinator, and I'm not going to be like the host tonight. Ryan, if you could go ahead and monitor the chat, go ahead and everybody type your questions in there, and I promise we will get to them at the end. We're going to continue our career series focusing on larger companies this time. Last time we talked about smaller companies, that kind of startup environment. Tonight we're going to be talking about Vortex Optics. So just like in previous sessions, we're going to get a little bit of insight of what it takes to break into these kind of conservation, these hunting and fishing companies, and what it takes to succeed once you're there. So tonight's guests are going to be Sawyer and Mark with Vortex Optics. Vortex is one of AFI's first sponsors, and they actually recently donated about 10 grand worth of gear, optics, all kinds of stuff. It's actually sitting right here. I haven't gone through it all because it's so much stuff. So and take a moment. Thank you, Vortex, for your continued support. It's one of the reasons we can do all the stuff we do. And it's really cool that you guys just keep supporting the level that you guys are. It's great. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. So we'll start with you, Sawyer. Tell us a little bit about Vortex, how it started, type of gear you guys make for anybody who's, been asleep for the past 20 years.
For sure. Thanks for joining, guys. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. Mark, obviously feel free to hop in here. So Vortex, kind of at its core, is family-owned business. So Dan Hamilton, the original founder, served in Vietnam and then came back and through the GI Bill, became a dentist. So he's doing that for a little bit, realized maybe that wasn't his calling. And oddly enough, got into a Wild Birds Unlimited business. So if you're not familiar with Wild Birds Unlimited, essentially a birding store, bird feed, bird baths, etc. They just so happen to also sell optics at the store. So kind of in that process, Dan was selling other brands and kind of realized that wasn't a huge fan of maybe some of the customer service and some of the service that he as a dealer was getting with some of those other brands. And kind of fast forward a little bit, started essentially a house brand, Eagle Optics. So they were actually making their own optics and selling them, and they still had those other brands. Fast forward a little bit more, as the Dan's sons got a little bit older and got a little bit more involved in the business. They saw kind of an opportunity in the shooting and hunting side of things. So kind of slowly made their way into that. And from there, really just grew like wildfire. So Vortex logo, as you guys know it, has really been around since around 2002. And from there, it's just kind of grown from there. Obviously, it's really cool working for a family-owned business. I think the value system that they've got is pretty incredible as well. Obviously, Dan, who served, and then there's a son who actually served as well. So I think it's been really cool to get that perspective through generations within the business. That's affected everything from how we operate as a company to products we offer to just the general mantra of the company. So I think that's been a really strong value system that Dan has instilled, and then it's just kind of continued to go from there within the company. Mark, you hop in too, for sure.
No, man, I think you really nailed it. I think a lot of it was that experience from, from the being, I guess, a manufacturer, but also the retail side, and having those two perspectives. Dan really saw, really a hole in the marketplace, like Sawyer said, to do it better. And, one of their sons, Joe, tells a story when he first started working for Vortex when he got out of college, but he went to a trade show, and when he was super gung-ho, and when he got back, he was somewhat dejected. He's like, Dad, I thought we had all these like amazing original ideas of, we're gonna have the best customer service, and we're gonna have the best warranty, and we're gonna have the best products. He goes, that's great, but everybody else is saying that too. He's like, everybody else has the same pitch. And Dan's response was, but we're actually gonna do it. And that story always definitely sticks with me. And I know those things are things that we work hard at. And Dan and the rest of the family, like Sawyer said, has really instilled those values in the employees here. And everybody is, on board with that. They hire, we have our core values, and that's what's extremely important. And, we hire people that align with those core values. And as I was putting some thought into the conversation that we're likely going to, or that we're having right now, like, I feel like a lot of those core values align really well with, at least what I see in members of the military that I've come into contact personally, and also the ones that are at Vortex.
Yeah, for sure. I think the core values that Mark mentioned, I'm sure we'll get into it later, is really like humble, hungry, smart. And I think I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves too, but I think just Vortex as a whole really hires well for culture, which I think is in today's day and age can be kind of a unique thing. I think you've seen a lot of companies move towards like incredibly specialized roles where they might not be a culture fit, but the company just kind of deals with it. So I think Vortex has done a really good job of navigating that. But yeah, that's kind of the high level.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see what you're talking about. If you ever have the opportunity to go kind of tour the Vortex facility or just visit it, it's a fantastic time. One of the things that really strikes me is when I bought my first like good pair of hunting boots. I was one of those guys that used his army boots forever until they were broken, which I didn't realize how terrible they were. But who would have thought the government would mistreat you, you know? But anyway, so I bought my first like expensive pair of boots, spent like $400. Ripped an eyelid out the first time using them, and took 6 months to get that repair done. So I mean, the repair was free, but it did take 6 months. And then you go to Vortex and you see this entire like just huge section of the building dedicated to turning out these repairs as fast as possible. Like, and you guys can speak to it, Sawyer and Mark, but it was insane how fast you guys are getting these repairs out. You can definitely just see like the value, the workmanship that goes into something like that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, and that, that goes back to, the customer is first, and that's definitely, again, everything kind of leads back to those core values, but, the customer is king to us. And I always like to say we try to build our stuff so a person never experiences an issue. But as you guys know, if you're end users of these types of products, we're oftentimes not putting them in the friendliest of environments, and wild things do happen, and we want to make sure that people are taken care of, before, during, and well after the sale, and that goes into that VIP warranty. And we do, I mean, we've got the staff, and we invest in that staff to be able to do that. It's not like one person back there tinkering it. I mean, it's, big teams of people that, they can tear binocular down from, to the tiniest screw, to the rubber armor, to whatever. And we're happy to do that if a person has an issue. And I'd say oftentimes it's, I'd say 2 weeks would be a very, very safe turnaround time, but it's oftentimes well inside of that. In fact, oftentimes it's about a 2-day turnaround. So
yeah, that's just incredible. Yeah, I guess let's go with you, Mark, for a second. Talk to us about your journey to Vortex. Like, what made you start there? Why'd you start looking there? What was that like? Tell that story.
Man, I'll try and keep it short. I grew up in a hunting, fishing family. Oh, there's my dog. So enjoy. Everybody meet Scarlett. And that was just like, that was what I was passionate about in life. I mean, that's really, all I cared about was hunting, fishing, shooting. Fast forward, finished up school, always gravitated more towards the creative side. So I got a degree in advertising and marketing, but really at the end of the day, all I knew how to do was hunt and fish. So I had a few outdoor retail jobs, one at a Norva store, one at a really killer store in downtown Seattle called Outdoor Emporium. Got an opportunity at Cabela's, was a copywriter for a number of years. I think eventually, somebody said, oh, this guy can actually talk to people. So I ended up moving over to the marketing brand management department, doing media relations. And so, from there, spied this company, Vortex, and I was, ready for a change. I loved Cabela's. I mean, it was actually amazing. I call that place like, it was like second outdoor college. Like it was just a super cool spot. But I was ready to do something different. Found Vortex, and when it was interesting when you were talking about, last time you talked about startup companies. This is my daughter, Mara. Say hi, Mara. So yeah, you're meeting the whole family. Yep, you're meeting the whole family, everybody. But when I started at Vortex, it was somewhat of a startup, so it was definitely a lot different than it looked today, but that was really exciting to me because when I was at Cabela's, you'd see these VPs, and they're VPs, but they started off sweeping the floor at Cabela's, and it's just like, wow, like that's really cool. And, Vortex was, they were doing fine, right? But it was like just really cool to see and hopefully be a part of something earlier in that process. And so, yeah, ended up doing actually a lot of what Sawyer does today as far as like the paid marketing, media relations, things like that. And over time, as we've grown, people have been able to specialize, which is really cool. So now I'm more on the content side of things, hosting our podcast and a few various other things, work very closely with Sawyer. But it's just been, it's been an amazing ride to just see the growth of the company. Everybody's just had their head down grinding. Everybody's always charging. Nobody takes their foot off the gas. I think that's part of the culture too. And everybody just wants to take it to the moon, and it's just an amazing team effort. It's a neat place for sure.
That's awesome. Go back to Sawyer. What brought you to Vortex? What was that like?
Yeah, so I'm from very small town in Southwest Wisconsin. Grew up hunting and fishing, kind of same as Mark, probably a little different hunting and fishing, a little less glamorous, I would assume, Mark.
I don't know, man. I fall more in love with these whitetails every day.
Yeah, we didn't use fly rods. I guess that's what I would say. But so then actually ended up going to college here in Wisconsin at UW. Wanted to stay kind of within that space, that outdoor space. It really felt like that was my calling at that point. And then went to Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, where I was there for about 6 years. I had a couple different roles. I was working on the stream bank easement program, so essentially working with landowners to on riparian streams, open up easements along them for access to trout fishing. So that was a pretty cool project. That's when the fly rods did come in. But from there, kind of worked more towards policy and marketing and PR for our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks division. So obviously you're working with hunters, you're working with anglers, you're working with people who hate hunting, you're working with people who hate fishing, you're working with politicians. So you've got two whole sides of the spectrum. So I think that was a really interesting kind of peek behind the curtain as to how policy actually got done, how funding worked, how to communicate with everyone from your average hunter to the people who are coming to all the public hearings that often no one went to and kind of screaming their guts out about something. So from there, I think to Trevor's earlier point, the government at some point, I don't know when it'll be. It's some people it's 5 years, some people it's 50. It's gonna grind you down to a pulp. So find it out that probably wasn't the long-term solution for me. So I had actually worked with Mark while I was at the DNR when he was at Vortex on kind of a web series project that we had going on. So, and I was familiar with Vortex before then, but kind of got to know the company a little bit. And then I had a friend that also worked at DNR that went to Vortex, and he was raving about it, obviously. So from there, waited another year, kind of bided my time a little bit, position opened up, and I jumped, and the rest is history.
I definitely know what you mean about those people screaming at the meetings. I'm a member of the Wisconsin Conservation Congress, and I scream at you guys all the time. So yeah, I get it. I can be rough.
Well, you can scream all you want now. I don't have a vested interest anymore.
Nice. All right, let's talk a little bit about the military service background. Like when you guys look at a new hire, or you're looking at an interview process, what about military service kind of stands out to you? What can these guys highlight on their resume that makes them stand out? I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say at a high level, and Mark, feel free to hop in. So Vortex has about 400 employees as it stands now, and currently we've got about 40 veterans on staff. So I can tell you with confidence that it is a major factor in hiring. I think it's something that we prioritize whenever we can and that we look for. As far as applying for a position and how service pairs into that, like obviously like any other job, you're going to want to make sure your resume is on point and it's going to capture all of that relevant stuff. And as far as job descriptions as a whole, I think the important part is just finding a lot of those keywords in the job description and really making sure you're tailoring it to that. And then obviously your service background is there's going to be an implication of work ethic and all of those things that I think fall back into that company mantra. So I think those things are going to have just a lot of implied value, especially with a company like Vortex. I think that's something we definitely prioritize. And I say we have 40 veterans working here, and we're always looking to build that number. I think it's something that's very important to everyone in the building. So I would say at a high level, really just finding a position that you think is something you're passionate about and really tailoring that resume to that. And then just making sure that service background is essentially like a widget of that. And that's going to tell us a lot about your character right off the bat. And from there, hopefully you're getting into that pipeline where more of the on-job stuff is applicable.
I think that's a great point, Sawyer, and I'm surprised it hasn't come up in our career series event so far. That's something we haven't talked about, is like tailoring your resume to a specific position. That's something you see more and more, especially with, like you said, you have 400 employees, like those larger companies. It's something like whether you were a company XO or whether you were a platoon sergeant, squad leader, it doesn't really matter. Find the way they're describing leadership at whatever company and put that into who you are as a leader, who you were in the Army. Like that's the biggest piece. That's a great point, Sawyer. Thanks for calling that out, man. Mark, I mean, same question. What do you look at in the service background? What do you look for?
I mean, I think the hook and bullet space is a super natural fit for people who have a military background. I mean, you've got number one, just like experience with firearms, oftentimes, right? Not always, but oftentimes, or at least some level. You've got leadership experience. You know how to work on a team. You know how you've experienced adversity. You're committed, right? Commitment. You've overcome challenges, and you've worked with people from probably, I would, and this is speculation, I'm not in the military, but from a lot of diverse backgrounds, right? And all that stuff comes into play. And then, you look at just the outdoor space, the hunt fish space in general. It's like, it's outdoor, it's active, it's physical. There's camaraderie. There's, at least at Vortex, I think we're super fortunate that we have, we do have a high level of camaraderie. We got, we work hard, we play hard. We keep it pretty loose as far as, joking around. So in that camaraderie is like a huge component. And I guess a lot of those things, or those, keywords that I just mentioned, like those are definitely qualities that I see in all of the people at Vortex that have military backgrounds.
Nice. I guess let's take it the other direction then, Mark. What are some of the weaknesses you see in like veteran applicants, or what are we doing wrong that we can hopefully avoid? Like, feel free, like just take some digs, man. Nobody's going to be upset.
I mean, that's kind of a tricky one. And probably because we do value that experience so much. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Sawyer, do you have anything on that? Honestly, I'm kind of drawing a blank there.
I would almost put the question back on you guys. And again, don't pull any punches here, but I guess when you guys are applying, whether it's specifically within the outdoor industry or elsewhere, are there things that maybe you're not giving yourself enough credit for, or that you've gotten feedback on that maybe you can improve as it applies to that? I think to Mark's point, it's really tough to say, because I think at a high level, the military experience on the resume, like you're going to get brownie points right off the bat. I can tell you that at Vortex for sure. I think beyond that goes back to that resume question, where it's like really putting in the work to make sure that thing is specifically tailored. But I would honestly put the question back on you guys, because I think if there's questions we can answer, if there's things you guys have experienced relative to that, I think that might help us answer. But
yeah, I mean, I'll go first, and I'll kick it over to Ryan. I know Ryan has interviewed at a couple different like outdoor industries before, so he may have a different perspective. But the thing that always stuck out to me is I never wanted to appear like I was better than anybody, and I was always struggling to kind of stay humble, just because, especially with like, describe a situation when you had to deal with adversity. And I'm like, well, yeah, this one time we were getting shot at, and then this vehicle blew up, and we had to do this, and like it's hard to tell that kind of story, so then you back it down. You don't tell that story. You tell it about a time where a soldier wouldn't shave or something, and then that doesn't apply to Vortex. So it's like that. I would say that's the biggest challenge that I would kind of see for my professional side before working for BHA. Like, how do you deal with those situational questions when your situations never like apply to a business aspect or marketing or sales or whatever? I agree, disagree. Ryan, what do you think, sir?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Trevor. And I'd kind of ask the same question another way. Specifically at a larger company like Vortex, where there's 400 employees, and you guys have both kind of alluded to it, there's a lot of specialization. Some military kind of background would lend itself to being an HR guy or to being a logistics guy or something like that. But a lot of us, and Trevor was an infantryman, but there was a lot of other military backgrounds where you don't have a specialized field. And a company like Vortex that's that big is looking, not just for a guy that can get stuff done. Like, how do you overcome the hard skills you're looking for a specific role that might come from, like, call it a military generalist as opposed to an HR specialist or, someone maybe that worked in public affairs or maybe someone that worked in logistics? Because a lot of what you guys previously described were soft skills, but what about, so like, if I'm interested in marketing, or if I'm interested in, manufacturing or being a product guy, how do I overcome that kind of initial barrier when I'm coming straight out of service?
Yeah, I would say at a high level, I think kind of mobility, flexibility being the two big ones. And what I mean by that is getting your foot in the door. Like, I'll use myself as an example, and it's probably a poor one. I didn't know anything about easements. I didn't know anything about that whole process at the DNR. But I knew I wanted to work there. I knew I was passionate at a high level about kind of the themes and the work they were doing. And I know I wanted to get in that building, and I was confident that I could work my way around. And I think another really positive thing about Vortex is they are laser focused on employee growth. And what I mean by that mobility term is we've got people working in vinyl repair that used to be in the warehouse. We've got people working in marketing that used to be in HR. We've got people working in machining that used to be in the warehouse. I think the big thing, and it's not always the easiest route, is getting your foot in the door. And you're always going to have that thing you're passionate about, whether it's marketing or whether it's I want to be the best binocular repairman in the absolute world. I think a place like Vortex is really good about giving you the mobility to, all right, we're going to hire you. We know your values are on point. We know you're a hard worker, whether that's the warehouse, whether it's HR, whether it's something like that. You're in the door. Now we know you're passionate about this. Go get your certificate. Go back to school. We'll help with that, and get to know these other departments, and kind of that's where that specialization kind of comes in a little bit. You're always going to have people that get hired that are, I'm a packaging engineer. It's what I know how to do. It's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And every company needs those people because they're so valuable. But you're also going to have the people that work in 4 different positions and do them all really well. And it's over the course of 10 years, and they're all completely different.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I'd say the exact same things. And actually, I just going back to, your previous question of, like, quotation mark mistakes, and even before you guys started talking about it, or don't be overly humble, because, like, people in the military, you have experiences that are completely unique that you otherwise would not get. Like, you're not going to get those anywhere else. And when I talk to, like, Justin down at Vortex Edge, like, sometimes, some story will slip out, or some nugget, or, I used to do this, or I did that. And I'm like, how has this, like, not even come up before, and I think it's like ingrained, that, it just seems like, like maybe overly humble or humble to a fault. But I mean, those are skills and experience that you're just not going to get anywhere else. And then, like Sawyer said, get your foot in the door. Maybe don't, a job might not be your dream job, but I think that's just pretty kind of the normal progression of things. But, my dream job, I didn't want to be a copywriter. I didn't necessarily want to work retail for the rest of my life, but, by doing that and then learning other qualities along the way, like, people in the military, they're coming out, like, you might not be like a marketing guru, but like I said earlier, like, you've led people, you've worked on a team, you've overcome adversity, you've done all the things, you have the core, Now you just need to learn the little things along the way to complement that, and then you're off to the races. And if you take that job that maybe isn't in the marketing department, or maybe it's not the the job with our shooting instructors or something like that, but those things are going to shine, and people are going to see that. And if you have desire, like you said, I mean, I'd say, and Vortex might be somewhat unique in some of these areas, but, we're going to support, people are going to see that, they're going to support that, and they're going to want to see you succeed. And we want you to be in the position that's right for you. I mean, one thing that we always say, we want the right people in the right seats on the bus, and those things are that's going to come out pretty naturally.
No, I agree completely. I think that goes really well with one of the questions we just had in the chat here. From Hunter Owen, who's our guy down there at running Bragg. So I'm just going to read it. Biggest challenges I have had leaving the military service to civilian world and now trying to leave government service is knowing that I could do a job, but feeling I don't meet the requirements listed in the description of the job and wondering if I'm going to make a livable wage. Would you recommend applying anyway, or do you have any tips on how to apply experiences that you have to the job description? I think that's a solid question, Hunter, because you have the same thing where like Ryan used to be in charge of a couple hundred people. I had 24 people. Like we've all had so you're coming from that where it's like, I have no problem coming down to sweeping the floors, but it's tough, especially when you get out and you're 36 or you're 40 and you've got a couple kids, like can't really afford to come through and sweep the floors. Which kind of response there? What do you guys think is the best advice you have?
I would say it's always good to be in the mix at a high level. And I know that's very high level thinking, but I think we've got a lot of people that work here now that applied for 4 other jobs, and it might not have been the right fit, but you get in the system. If you get an interview, people get to know you, they see those kind of values shine through. And then from a more formal standpoint, I think it's a really good question on the requirements listed side of things. I think I don't work in HR. I'm not going to speak for HR, but I think there's always a certain level of flexibility for candidates there that I think can be important to take advantage of at times, whether that's you write the best goddamn cover letter in the world because you went on the Vortex website and you saw the company values and you saw how we operate, and you apply that directly. I think that can have an effect. And I think the other thing again is just applying those values and those skills that you've acquired in the military to the job. I think it's things like leadership. I think it's like dealing with challenges and adversity, being flexible in the workplace, problem solving, things like that. There are going to be jobs where that's going to be less of a factor if it's like super specialized, like if you're running a $10,000 machining rig, but there's always going to be jobs where those values are always going to shine through. So I think it's really being really intentional about applying those values and those skills you've got into things like the cover letter and the resume creatively to fit some of the values of the company.
I think you're spot on, Sawyer. That's something that was a struggle for me getting out, is you kind of you list your military accomplishments as they read in the military, and you expect everyone to know what that is. But I started getting much better results when you sit down and you take 3 hours and you really write out that cover letter for this specific job, and you copy and pasting from the website. Like Vortex will list their definition of values and leadership, and you go put that right in there and you're going to stand out. It takes a lot of effort, especially coming from the military where everything is a set form. Like you don't really apply for anything. Everybody has the same format in all their reviews. Like everybody uses the same language. So adapting that language, I think, is key. Let's look at another question here. What would you guys say as far as jobs that require a degree or equivalent experience? What would you this is a tough one because there's not really specifics, but what would you say our time in the service would mean for equivalent experience? Does that kind of dedication and values outweigh some of the fine print, bachelors of marketing or whatever? And I think we've kind of touched on this in the past, but what do you guys think there?
I mean, I think that's probably going to depend on the job at times, but I mean, yeah, all that stuff like we've talked about holds a ton of weight, and a lot of that translates over, without having, a specific job in mind to speak to, that's a little bit difficult, but but yeah, and I think like what you mentioned, Trevor, is, translating, that service over, to how that does apply to that, that job that you might be applying for. I think that's key. Cause I know as, like a person who wasn't in the military, when I do chat with some of our guys, like people in the military, like they have their own language, right? I mean, it is like a second language. And, I don't know what those things mean. So like, I feel like an idiot, but I ask a lot too. It's like, like when you're on your like seventh acronym in a row, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to, back it up there a little bit. You're gonna have to explain that to me. But yeah, I mean, I think, like we talked about, though, not to be super redundant, but yeah, all that experience holds a ton of weight.
And I think too, there's a certain level of talking in future state, whether it's in the cover letter or the resume or a conversation with HR about, I don't have this, but I'm very interested in acquiring that skill. I'm very interested in going back to school. How can you support me in that? I think that's where you take the values and you take that hunger to, I might not have it now, but I'm going to get it. I think that can be seen as incredibly valuable too. And that goes back to that previous comment about kind of employee growth and Vortex's commitment to support that. But it also goes back to you might not get the dream job right off the bat, but I think if you're very vocal about kind of where you want to be and where you want to go, and being super persistent and inquisitive about how the company can support that, I think if you get in the door, you already passed the smell test, right? Like you passed the culture test. So I think from there, it's really staying on them and say, hey, I want to get my certificate in business. Like I'd love to get a degree in marketing. I'm going to go to night school. I'm super busy. I got 2 kids, but I'm super committed to this. I want to learn more. I think that can be a really good trait, and I think puts you on a really good path there too.
So I guess in line with that, like I know the answer because I direct message HR reps on LinkedIn every time I apply for a job. Like I'll find somebody at the company with an HR rep. Might not be the right one, but I go ahead and reach out. Would you advise, like, would you say that's a good practice? Is it creepy? How does that come off to you? And I know you're not an HR Sawyer, but like to me, it seems like that's just good business. Like obviously, wanted to get to know people. Like, what do you think?
Hey, always shoot your shot. It's something that can never, ever hurt. I've had people reach out to me directly. I always pass them straight on to HR. I've talked to people on the phone. Same kind of deal. Like I won't sit here and tell you all of those guys are now working in the building and it always works out, but it's one of those things that it literally can't hurt.
Awesome. Ryan, you had your hand up. What's going on? What do you got a question?
Yeah, a couple comments Sawyer made me think of this one. I think it's important because it varies from company to company. So I'd be curious to hear the perspective at Vortex's. In the hiring and recruiting process, what's the different function that HR, that one recruiting, 2 HR generalists, and then 3, the hiring manager play in that process? And then how does that kind of inform or influence networking?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So like I said, there's a couple different ways that kind of connections will be made and people come in, whether it's on LinkedIn, Glassdoor, any of those things. So resume and cover letter comes in for almost all of our positions. I believe all there'll be an initial screening process by HR, but that'll be a function of sitting down with the hiring manager and going beyond that position description. And that's where it really gets into the values. Like I want someone who's hungry. This position, they could be a little bit greener. We're willing to train them up. We want them to be a long-term fit here. We don't want someone who thinks they're absolute top of the mountain for this job. That's not a good fit, not going to fit in culture-wise. I think from there, we do like a video screening. So usually what the hiring manager will do is they'll record some questions, and then we'll get the candidate on video answering some of those questions. I think it really helps to put a face to the name and kind of humanize that person a little bit versus just going into the resume and cover letter. So I think it kind of adds another layer to it. And then from there, we are also very, very, very to the point of almost craziness, overdo it on interviews. And which I think is a great thing because you always get the right fit. But you're going to come in, you're going to get lunch with one team, you're going to interview with another team, you're going to get a tour, you're going to meet other people. So I think it's not just, hey, you're going to come in and meet the hiring manager and he'll decide if you're a good fit. It's really going to be, you're going to be in the mix. You're going to meet a lot of people. We're going to meet after, we're going to chat about it. We're going to talk about fit. We're going to talk about maybe this person is a little greener, but culture wise, they are right on the money. The hiring manager might be, we're more than willing to put in some extra time to train them up. There might be other people on the team that they're super passionate about growth. They're going to step in and help. So that was a very long-winded way to say the hiring process, I think at Vortex is, I don't think rigorous is the right word, but it's very, very, very intentional. It isn't always the quickest, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, sir. I mean, the only thing I'd add to that, which I think that was absolutely spot on, is and you touched on it earlier, but apply, right? And even if, after you go through that process, because it is so intentional, and maybe for whatever reason, you don't get that job, right? I also, in the same breath, would say don't not expect a phone call at some point, because after getting that background, there might be a position that opens up. It could be a week later, it could be a year later, and we're going back in the archives. We've done all the pre-work. We know who you are. We know what you're about, and you might get a phone call, or we might know, hey, you know what? It's not this position right now, but in the back of our head, we know that this position is opening up, and frankly, you might be a better fit for this position. And that's where we might reach out and be like, hey, not this, but what are your thoughts on this other position? And oftentimes it's really it's a better fit for Vortex, and it's a better fit for that person. So, I mean, there's been a lot of instances where people apply for one job and they end up taking a different job.
And a lot of times too, you'll ask that person and they'll be like, oh yeah, I knew that was the case. I just wanted to get my foot in the door. And the next thing you know, they're sitting in the cubicle next to you.
That's a great, I'm glad you guys brought that up as well. I think that answers a ton of the questions kind of indirectly. It's just kind of, just get in there, and kind of have to trust that company. They're going to put you in the best place for success. And not all companies are like Vortex, but if you've done your research and you've talked to a few people and you meet them at events like BHA Rendezvous or like SHOT Show or anything like that, you kind of get a feel for how the company is. I think that's great. Just get in there. Along with that, I have another question in the chat here. Liam Hale asks, would you recommend working your way up through the company by taking an entry-level position, or working indirectly approach outside the company? For example, would you work retail in Bass Pro, Shields, Cabela's, and how much would that experience weigh in to then moving to a position you'd like better, or you think you'd fit in better at Vortex? Does that matter? How would you recommend going about that?
I mean, I think both of those paths are super solid, right? I think that'd be a tough one for me to, I guess, decide which one would be better. Either way, you're getting a ton of experience. I think, we do pride ourselves on customer service, and I personally put a lot of weight on retail experience, because that's what it is. And you have to know what you're talking about, and you need to be able to help people out. And you're working with people, on that one-to-one, face-to-face, interpersonal level. And if you can succeed in that, I think you can succeed in a lot of things. But yeah, then there's a lot to be said for just getting your foot in the door and working your way up and proving yourself and getting to know people. And that goes a long way too, because, a lot of it is, or things, it never hurts to know people, particularly where you ultimately might want to end up. But, I think also those outdoor retail jobs, kind of prove that you're into the products that you're likely going to be working on in some capacity. You're personally invested, whether you are at work or not, you're personally invested in those activities. So I think that's always super cool.
Yeah, I think you nailed it too. And I mean, we have a lot of people in the building that work at Vortex that previously worked at a Vortex dealer. I think it gives you a really interesting perspective because you're talking to the consumer directly. And I think just speaking as someone who works in Vortex, like that's always something that is such an incredibly important perspective, because a lot of times we'll have an idea and we'll be like, this is the greatest idea ever, but we got to put ourselves in that consumer shoes a little bit more sometimes. So I think to Mark's point, it really depends. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. I think working in a retail environment is going to give you a lot of product knowledge. It's going to give you a lot of knowledge of the consumer. Whereas starting in the company and working your way up, you're going to get a little more knowledge of the company itself. You're probably going to make some connections within the building. So it's really, I wouldn't prioritize one over the other.
And some of that might depend on the position too. You look at a lot of people in our sales department, things like that. There's a lot of folks there that, do have that outdoor retail background. And I know when I was at Cabela's, there was a lot of folks that worked retail at Cabela's that, and actually not to diminish that job in any capacity, because I love outdoor retail. In fact, that was one of my favorite things that I love, or that would happen occasionally, is I'd be on lunch, from my job in the corporate building, just in the retail store, and you'd have your Cabela's badge on, and then people would, be like, oh, like, hey, can you help me, check out these fly rods? And I just always loved doing that, even though I wasn't working retail, but I pretended like I was. But anyway, I just think it translates over super well. And where I was going with that, I kind of sidetracked on that story, but like a lot of people that worked retail at Cabela's got plucked from there to go work in the corporate building, because people saw like, oh, this person's super knowledgeable, they're good with people, they're making sales, and they're a hard charger, whatever. So I definitely saw a lot of that happening while I was over there too.
Now, I'm glad you guys said that, and thank you, Liam, for asking that. Like, initially, I'm reading that, I'm like, dude, there is no way Staff Sergeant Hubbs is going to take a dang checkout job at Cabela's. But then, like, hearing you guys talk, and now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, actually, like, when you get your 60 or 90 days of terminal leave, like right at the end, when you're getting out of the Army, like they call it terminal leave, and you basically get to use all your leave you've accumulated at once, where they still pay you, but you basically get like 60 days off. Like, that would be great if I would email or, message Mark or Sawyer on LinkedIn and be like, hey, vet, I'm getting out. I'd love to come work at Vortex eventually. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to go work at Cabela's behind the counter, do checkout stuff. I want to learn about the industry. I'm going to do that for 90 days. And then I'd love to come in and apply and learn more about it, and just like let you guys know, get on the radar. Like, the more you hear you guys talk, the more I think about it, I'm like, that actually sounds like a wonderful plan, because you're still getting paid by the Army. So you don't necessarily need to make all the money in the world. You just need some outdoor experience. And
that goes back to that future state comment too, Trevor. That's going to tell me a lot about you, that you're taking the time and thinking that way. So that originally checks, or right off the bat, checks a box for me. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a really good question, Liam. Thank you. We're kind of getting close to the end. I mean, the last kind of stuff that questions I have here are a little selfish. Sawyer, Mark, what kind of new gear you guys got coming out that you can tell us about? What's the new best thing out there?
I'll let our podcast host handle this one. He's the man for the job.
Yeah, I'd say this. The product development team has always got things in the hopper. They're always charging. Coming up with something bigger and better. The worst part about being in the know is, when something finally hits, you kind of know about the next thing that's coming up, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't think they could make this better, and now they're making it better. But I'd say most recently, we completely revamped our handheld rangefinder operation. So we had a couple models that were great models, but they went away. We replaced them with 2 new models and added 1 new model. From a nomenclature perspective, if a person's familiar with the Vortex lineup, it's going to be in line with our other product categories. So we introduced the Crossfire HD 1400 handheld rangefinder, the Diamondback HD 2000, and the Viper HD 3000 rangefinder. We still have the Razor HD 4000, which really in the lineup previously was the only one that kind of shared that same nomenclature as like our, binocular series, rifle scope series, spotting scope series. So, but yeah, they're all killer new rangefinders. As the name denotes, or the 1400, 2000, or 3000, that's going to be their max reflective range. overall increases in optical quality. They all have illuminated reticles now. Readout times are faster. Just all in all, an upgrade. And you're going to kind of see that from the the entry point of $199 for a price point, $199, $299, $399 for the new rangefinders. So and they're all gonna just fill really, really nice niches in that handheld rangefinder market. So with particularly that new Crossfire, nobody has an excuse to not have a rangefinder anymore.
No, that's perfect. I use those cheap, like $30 rangefinders that you get at Walmart for years, and then I actually upgraded to, I think it was the Ranger 1300 that you guys have a couple of years ago, and it's phenomenal. Like, it does the angles for you. Has just completely changed the way that I hunt. Both bow hunting and like distance Western stuff has been awesome. So that's really cool to hear. I like that a lot. That is good news. And all those are obviously going to be subjective to our the super veterans discount we get with everything at Vortex, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I saw a really good question come in from Raphael here too, Trevor.
Yep, I saw that there. Raphael asked, are there any certifications that outdoor industry companies look for or that can improve our chances that we gain prior to transitioning, such as project management professional, Lean Six Sigma, certified managerial accountant? I'm about a year out from transitioning, looking to build my resume. No, I think that's a great question. I'd love to hear your guys' take on it.
Yeah, I would say, Raphael, it really depends on kind of what you're interested in doing. I think if project management is something you're passionate about, I think that in particular is a really smart one, because I'll use an example at Vortex. We have project managers in marketing, we have project managers in new product development, we have project managers in IT. So definitely gives you a good amount of flexibility. I think that's a really smart move, but I think from there it really just depends on if you want to do the PMP, if that's something you're passionate about. I think it really comes down to balancing kind of how that passion shakes out. Like, do you want to do the PMP? It's going to give you more flexibility. Do you want to do some type of certificate that's a little more specialized if that's something you're more passionate about? So it's really a balancing act that is not an easy one. But I think certificates like those and just never a bad idea, whether you want to work at Vortex or anywhere else. Even if you go work somewhere else and you crush it as a project manager for 2 years and come back, I think never a bad idea.
For sure. One thing that I'd just add, which really nobody asked, but I'll tell you anyway, is, I think as, like in the space that we're fortunate to be in, as far as, optics and, outdoors, firearms, hunting, archery, like these are, I consider Vortex it's like a passion brand. Like, we're lucky that we make products that people are passionate about the activities that they use them for. It's part of their lifestyle. It's part of their identity. They're fun products. They're fun activities. And, I think a lot of people, that start at Vortex or other outdoor companies, they end up there because they are that customer. Like, they are that person. And it can be, depending on your position, that can be extremely valuable, whether that's, marketing or sales or whatever, what have you. It's pretty easy to sniff out somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about, the nuance of, hunting, fishing, rifles, things like that. I talked to, mentioned earlier how like the military, like it can be like a second language. And I feel like, the hunt shoot space can be a second language as well. And so if you have a high level of experience there, passionate about learning more about that, I think that goes a long way as well, because who our customer is because you are our customer.
I agree with you, Mark. I think those are the best ways to do is to kind of connect with you guys at, whether it's a SHOT Show, whether it's at like Wisconsin BHA Rendezvous coming up, or wherever you guys are at. Just make a contact somewhere in the company, be nice, try and figure out what you're looking for, and go about it that way. Raphael, just to speak for me personally, I have had both my PMP. It's expired now, and then I'm a green belt in Lean Six Sigma. I don't think anybody ever asked me about it twice during an interview process. Nobody kind of cares. I know like little doohickeys and danglies are great in the military. Nobody ever followed up with me on like, oh, what does that entail? Or, oh, how would you do this? So I kind of want to say don't waste your money, but I also don't know everything about everything. So do whatever you want, man. All right, let's see. Did I miss anybody's questions? I don't think so. I'm scrolling through the chat. Anybody, anything they want to say before we get into like who wins the attendance prize?
I do have one question for the group, Trevor, if we got time.
We have 9 minutes, so of course we do.
I hope this was helpful for you guys. Obviously, we're more than happy to do this, and hopefully Trevor can share our contact info afterwards if you guys have any follow-up questions. But I would almost put it back on you guys because I'll speak for myself. I don't have experience in the service, so I can't speak for you. I haven't experienced what you've experienced, so my perspective just isn't there. But I think a lot of what we try to focus on at Vortex is providing resources and providing help where it's most useful. So we don't have to talk about it on the call, but if you guys have things that you've noticed as you were transitioning out of the service and things that you've experienced, definitely shoot those over because we are always trying to talk to the right people to figure out what we can do. It's not something that's going to be solved in a marketing boardroom. It's something that's going to be solved talking to people like you. So I would say definitely feel free to reach out, and it could be super specific. It could be an organization. It could be anything. That's always something that we're more than happy to chat about and see where else we can help, because things like this are really great and is as good of use of our time as I could ever think of. Like, this is fantastic, but we also try to think on that macro level of like, what else can we do to help? So always feel free to reach out and share any of that perspective, because that's going to be super helpful on our end.
I'm glad you said that, Sawyer, because after I mentioned like looking you up or looking whoever up on LinkedIn, I saw a couple comments there, but I'm pretty sure you're about to get 17 new LinkedIn friends, you and Mark. So get ready for those messages.
Good.
Let's see. Ryan Burkar. Oh, okay, he's just talking to Raphael again. Let's see. All right, Ryan, did you pick a number between 1 and 17 for me? You can message me about it. You can say it out loud. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, we'll do number 8.
We're doing 8. All right. So if you haven't been to one of these career events, how it kind of works is I wait till the end. I have Ryan or Andy or whoever one of the assistants here is pick a number. Then I pull everybody up on like that grid view, like that 70s TV show, and I count out who is number 8. All right, and number 8 today is Scott Carroll out of Montana. Scott manages our Montana team out there, and he's pretty new, so this is great. Scott, you win a t-shirt and hat of your choice from Vortex, and Sawyer, don't worry, I'll pay for it.
Hey, thanks.
I wouldn't worry about that, Trevor.
Yeah, I think we can cover that.
Okay. Yeah, Scott, you got my email. If not, it is in the top of the chat, but send me your sizes and shipping address, and we'll handle that this week.
Cool.
Super last chance for anybody to ask any questions. We got 5 minutes left. If you just want to ask for a job, you could do that. Who knows? Shoot your shot, man.
Pick another number, Ryan. We'll give away a job here.
That is legally binding.
Yeah.
Sorry, I told you I'm not giving it up. Okay.
Awesome.
Sorry, HR.
No. I have my last my last question then. And it's for Mark. Mark, I need to get on your podcast. So
Dude, let's do it.
with the program.
Let's get something locked in, man. That'd be super fun for sure.
Awesome.
So
I'll shoot you an email, and Hunter, just because you're a cool dude, you can be on there with me. You can be the co-host to the guest, if that makes sense. Awesome.
lock it in. You can be expecting an email here shortly.
Fantastic. Awesome, guys. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. This is the first kind of, had guides on talking about kind of running their own business. We've had FHF gear, like these really small companies come on and talk. Next, we're having some writers and photographers come on, but I think this is probably the most helpful one that I've been a part of, just because there's so many companies like Vortex's size that are just big enough to be intimidating for the military community. And I think you guys offered a ton of great information. I can't thank you enough. Plus, thank you for this giant box full of gear. If you guys want to look at it, it's a big box full of gear. So thanks, guys. I can't say thank you enough times.
Go use it. That's how you thank us.
Yeah.
No problem with that. We're taking a group out to the Bob Marshall Wilderness here in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Ryan? So
2 weeks. Yeah, we'll be out there hiking in on the 8th.
That's right.
Dude, that'll be awesome. How
Yeah.
many days you guys going in?
5, Ryan?
Yeah, we hike in on Friday and come out on Tuesday. So in between 3 days of manual labor with traditional crosscut saws and axes doing trail cleaning.
Oh, snap.
Dude, awesome.
It'll be a great time. We got an opportunity for some high mountain trout in the evenings because the days are going to be like 18 hours long. So, bring your 3 weight and yeah, it'll be a great time. We're definitely going to glass up some cool stuff.
That'll be awesome.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording then if nobody has any more questions.